Lifestyle Podcast.
The business behind the headlines.
Welcome, everybody. Today I have a very special guest and a very, very close friend of mine, Borys Tam. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, man.
How are you?
As always, very good, thank you.
So Boris has a very interesting background. He will talk about it coming forward. But basically, he works in AI with AI, and he has a master's degree also in international real estate and planning, which he will talk about. So it's very interesting to us to basically link real estate with AI and understand more of how us real estate professionals can leverage AI in real estate. So first of all, Boris, tell us a bit about yourself, what you've done in the past and what you're doing right now with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So nice to meet you guys. I currently live in Poland, but I've spent 8 years living and working and studying in London, which is where we originally met. As Loic mentioned, for my master's degree, I did international real estate and planning. And I worked for about a year and a half in the industry, after which I've decided that the prop tech element of it was always more exciting, and therefore I just decided to just go headfirst into technology. I spent about 4 years after that working in infrastructure and other bits and bobs, and digital assets as well. So I know a little bit about Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all these things. But obviously, I've moved on now to something that's, I think, a little bit more useful than my previous endeavors, which is obviously artificial intelligence. At the moment, I work at a company called Yantra. Yantra Technologies essentially is a fintech. What we do is we aim to use large language models to resolve problems that previously were only solvable by operations individuals. So, for example, in a hedge fund, there is a lot of issues when hedge funds trade between each other. There's a lot of trade breaks. There's a lot of manual sort of reconciliation needed. Our product, essentially, 95% of these issues, our product can resolve autonomously using large language models. And I think it's an interesting use case because nowadays, obviously, people talk about AI as if it's like a magic pill and it's going to solve everything. And whether it's a bubble or not, everyone is obviously constantly fighting over that. But I do think that the most interesting use cases are not the ones that are going to spring up in 20 years, in 10 years, but ones that already are here and already are being implemented and are genuinely improving quality of life and productivity for people. So despite having spent a bit over 2.5 years in real estate, I've done it sort of more in Europe, in London, but I'm super keen to see how that space evolves given everything that's changing, especially with artificial intelligence.
So you started basically in real estate. What were you doing? Were you doing some acquisitions? Were you doing?
So first 6 months I did in research, and that was London offices, specifically lettings. Then I moved on to valuations. So that would be fund valuations. So clients that we used to work with at the time, sort of largest portfolios in the UK, would contract us to value their set of properties in a given portfolio and submit sort of monthly reevaluations of sort of their assets to price shares in the funds to their investors, etc., etc. I think that was sort of the more corporate side of real estate that I've been involved in.
Pretty interesting. So back in the day when you were doing these things in real estate, there was no AI, or it was barely launched, right?
None whatsoever. I remember even the reason I got into digital assets in the first place was, and I wrote my master's thesis on sort of blockchain applications in real estate specifically. The reason I got into it in the first place was because I believe that, especially in the UK, the land registry could be very easily sort of tokenized and put on the blockchain. And that was years ago, before even sort of cryptocurrencies became a thing. AI was sort of non-existent at that time. No one even thought about large language models or diffusion models or anything at all, like they currently are sort of talk of the town.
Okay, so basically, when you were doing that, do you think like the fact that having AI would have changed your job completely and make it easier, for example, for valuation and all on those different aspects? You think it would have been a much easier job to basically find the information and just redo the calculations over and over, or do you think the impact would have been light because the data was not that big? What do you think?
Truth be told, the valuations job essentially had two elements. Element number one was looking at comparable properties that have either sold or have been let, to essentially understand the yields. And that element, I think, almost certainly can be automated now with AI. I feel as if real estate and corporate real estate is quite a slow moving business, especially that this asset class is very slow as well. It's not going to go anywhere. That the real estate is there, and it's quite slow moving. But definitely the sort of low level analyst entry level jobs that exist or have existed, 100% can be automated with artificial intelligence. The sort of proper I'm more than certain that proper tools exist now for this. But essentially, it's just looking at and comparing data. When you have to look and compare data, a machine can do this way better than you. Not only because it can look at hundreds of thousands of records at once, but also it is very good at picking up patterns that humans might have missed in big data sets.
So basically, it feels like a very, very high IQ individual that it just finds the pattern and does it right away, right? Something like that.
Exactly. I mean, in general, in my work with AI so far, I like to describe this technology as working with all these AI agents and whatnot. I like to describe it as working with a group of savant, super intelligent kids. They are extremely intelligent. They can do things that a normal task for a human being is very few people can do it, and even then it takes them hours. They can do it in a matter of minutes, but they don't have a solid understanding of they don't have a model of real life. They don't understand what you're actually trying to achieve apart from what you tell it. And therefore, yes, it does feel like a super smart individual that just works extremely fast, never sleeps, etc. But very often it goes off path and it gets lost because it really doesn't understand what the overarching principle that you're aiming and building towards is.
So I had a question, a more personal question. Like with AI, when I ask AI a question, it gives me like very interesting solutions, but most of the time it invents things.
Yeah.
So you know basically the ins and outs of AI, like what is the reason for AI not just taking data and also just basically inventing things? Do you know if there's a specific reason for it to do that, or?
The specific reason is that obviously AI, there's many different AIs, but the most sort of popular ChatGPT or Anthropic, what they really release is large language models, which is essentially like a very smart autocomplete. It just looks at correlations between words and huge data sets and understands meaning that way. Now, when it's being reinforced learning is applied to that model, they have sort of overarching principles that the model should always be helpful, should always aim to complete the task, etc., etc. And what happens is the model doesn't understand the difference between finishing the task exactly how you said it versus creating something that looks like the task is finished and also being helpful and fulfilling its job that way. Because it doesn't have a model of sort of punishment or reward like humans do. It just understands, oh yeah, it looks like this could be the solution, and it saves me like 100 steps of reasoning and of work. It's good enough. It fulfills the purpose. It's being helpful, or so it thinks. Here is the hallucination.
Okay.
And there is many more sort of reasons why, statistically speaking, and sort of just purely mathematically, models forget things and then they invent them. It's not necessarily even that the programming is bad. It's just the limitation of the current technology as in large language models.
So you would have to look further and spend more computing power and et cetera, and at some point like it becomes like more inefficient, you think?
I mean, the truth is you can already lower the hallucinations to an extent that's very tolerable.
Okay.
It's all about the system prompt and sort of the guardrails you build around it. So in the world of AI, essentially, there's the talk about sort of the harness. If you know the concept or not. Essentially, you have the brain, which is the large language model. It could be Claude Opus. It could be GPT 5.5. It could be Mistral. It could be Qwen. Whatever model you have, that's the brain. Now everything around it is the harness. The harness is the system prompt, is the tool it has, is how well you can structure its work so that its context doesn't fill up too easily, etc. In that harness element, essentially, you can already build in certain guardrails that will make it hallucinate way less. And if it hallucinates, the hallucinations are way less harmful or way less impactful. You can always ask it to prove to you that it did the work it claims it did. Right. Show me evidence that you did it. Don't just tell me, oh yeah, I did it. Show me the actual evidence. Show me the code. Show me a screenshot of whatever you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
So there is ways you can get around that, but obviously, I think in the current format, we'll never get absolute 0% hallucinations. It's just the limitation of the technology.
Right. So just going back to something else that you were talking about, I remember now. I mean, you were just talking about it that you also worked in blockchain, and to me that's also very interesting because people talk about a lot about like smart contracts for real estate. So going back to real estate, and they talk about how it could make it easier actually to transact with properties and etc. using the blockchain. Me, I'm not familiar at all with the blockchain. I'm not familiar with the coins. I'm not familiar with any of that. But I hear a lot of noise talking about just how you can transact with the property using smart contracts or buy little small shares of properties, make it easier for you to basically own a part of the property. Like just overall, like what is your thoughts on how some applications from blockchain can be applied to ownership of properties and transaction of properties?
I think first and foremost, what has to happen is people have to make the distinction between sort of blockchain as technology and obviously cryptocurrency as a whole. Cryptocurrencies as a whole is a can of worms. I don't think I want to open right now.
Okay.
It comes with pluses and minuses. It's getting slowly more institutional, and people are starting to treat this a bit more seriously. But there is still a lot of sort of rug pulls. There's a lot of scams, and it's a very gray area sort of territory. However, the tech itself essentially operates on the premise of a decentralized database. So instead of imagine there's 9 of us, and we're playing poker, but we don't have the chips. So instead of designating one person to keep track of everyone's positions, we all keep track of each other's positions. And that way, if someone tries to cheat and say, "Hey, actually, I have X much more than this guy," which is incorrect, other 8 people sort of pick it up and say, "Okay, that's clearly wrong." So that's the idea of obviously simplified way of how the blockchain works. But what you said, I think, makes sense. But the underlying technology is great, but the assets like Bitcoin or Ethereum are inherently incompatible with just transacting for any real asset, simply because of the volatility. The volatility of Bitcoin or Ethereum is so high that in the time to sort of sign a deal and make the sort of whatever real estate transaction, even a small residential real estate, when you try to complete the sale, it can take days or even weeks. In that time, the value of Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever can swing up or down insanely by an insane amount. So this I don't think is going to happen. I don't think people are going to buy properties with Bitcoin or Ethereum. Although obviously the edge case, the odd case here and there, sometimes happens. But as a general trend. On the other hand, though, the tech itself is solid, and I think stablecoins are one area where you essentially, a stablecoin is nothing but like a digital version of a dollar or a euro, mostly dollars. I think most of the assets are concentrated in the dollar, and the idea there is that you can send them almost instantaneously to whoever else across the world because it runs on the same network as Ethereum, for example, but doesn't have the volatility. Transacting like this for example, international property sales could be great because instead of waiting on intermediary banks and making sure that the money hits the account and the wire here, if you're in Europe and you're trying to send money to the US, you have a different like Swift, and here you have the wire, and it's very complicated. This can happen within 15 minutes, so the guy can send the money, sign the paper, and receive the cash before leaving the sort of transaction room. On the smart contracts element of it, I don't think so. As in, the simple truth is that it takes like in principle, a lot of what digital assets and blockchain promises is great, but to achieve the critical mass of people to actually move on chain and to do things on chain is a task that the industry has attempted over the last 8 years or and whatnot, and failed quite spectacularly, to be honest. As I said, this is slowly starting to happen, but not directly. It happens indirectly. So you could have a real estate fund that owns properties that issues tokenized shares on the fund instead of a London Stock Exchange, for example. It would issue it on the Ethereum, and you can buy it on the Ethereum blockchain, but it just be a fractional ownership of the fund itself. What else did you talk about? Oh, the fractional ownership of properties. I honestly think it's just not going to work because you still need a manager. You need someone to manage the property, and ultimately, if you're going to purchase shares in any sort of equity in real estate, it's most likely going to be a fund, because the fund will take care of the management and will let the property, will repair it, will maintain it. If you were to just say, hey, here's an office building, you can own 1,000th of that building, great. People might buy a bit more, a bit less, but then how do you actually run the property? How do you maintain it?
It will still be centralized in some sort of
exactly. So for this reason, I think a real estate fund tokenization is happening and is going to keep happening. Slowly but surely it's gonna progress. But that's going to happen for every asset class. It's going to be for every sort of fund, for every exchange traded product. This is independent of real estate, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And one thing about you were talking about like how cryptocurrency, and blockchain works. Like you have basically 9 poker players, and they're all like looking at all the transactions.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like the whole concept of decentralization, right? Like to make sure that everything is. But how do people like combat the fact that some entities have most of the control over that? Like there's like maybe 3 players, and one of the players has like 90% or 60%. It depends on what. Like I think for Bitcoin, like the top 3 of the computing, the mining, I guess, systems are like have 60% of the whole power, or they get together, they can kind of like shift to the blockchain, right? So
theoretically, but in practice, the value of their assets depends on the trustworthiness of the blockchain.
Right.
So obviously, yeah, they could collude and they could steal, but if that happens, there's multiple things people can do, and it's happened, for example, with Ethereum once already, where there was a fork. People said, okay, whatever happened doesn't sort of. We were forking the chain, we're splitting away from it, and this is the new Ethereum chain. The old is Ethereum Classic, it still exists, but it's essentially a fork in the road.
Mm-hmm.
And then the massive users, massive investors, and people that actually believe in one or the other will have to sort of migrate. That happens rarely because very often when there's a fork, the whole sort of ecosystem gets fragmented and people lose trust, and obviously asset prices go down. The truth is that, in my opinion, these sort of decentralized systems are a lot more centralized than you think.
Yeah.
Especially if you have even the tiniest amount of proficiency in using blockchain explorers, Ethereum scan, or whatever else you use. You can very easily trace. I'm not going to name sort of names, protocols, or nothing, but you can very easily trace the sort of centralized wallets that own most of a given asset. So to an extent, as I said, the technology is great, but everything else around is a bit of a mirage. It's a bit of a lie told to people, I think. And you can see that people have stopped buying that lie because asset prices are currently down. And overall, I think, from at least what I'm hearing from my friends that are still in the industry, it is a rough time and a rough place to be at the moment. And like, it's difficult to blame the markets, difficult to blame people, because the digital asset industry had, as I said, 6-8 years to sort of change the way they operate, to actually find actual use cases. And with great pains, stablecoins, maybe they're serving some purpose. Maybe some fund tokenization where you have a bit more composability and some efficiency gains, but they're realistically small. The rest is, it only exists to fulfill the need of something in crypto. So when you have exchanges, some exchanges are great for on-ramping and off-ramping, but a lot of exchanges, they only exist to serve people that already have crypto and just want to trade it.
Yeah.
Which, great, but no external person was going to get involved in that because they don't need to. There's nothing that this tech offers to them. It's like, hey, this is significantly better than your current banking app, significantly better than your current way of title ownership in the UK, for example, right? Like, as I mentioned, the land registry. At the moment, there isn't like a killer feature for people to come over.
So this is very, very interesting because it was like back when this started, and it started like as a huge thing. People thought that like blockchain and cryptocurrency was going to change the world, and it was going to have like a much bigger impact than it's had, to be honest. So this kind of almost brings me to the topic of AI again, because people were maybe over speculative and over hyped about some of the use cases, some of the things that AI right now is capable of doing. And I wonder if it's going to have more limitations than people think. People are thinking that it's going to do more than it's actually going to do. What is your view on that? Like, do you think it's going to keep evolving? Do you think what we have right now in terms of use cases is what it is, or what's your thought coming from blockchain? Do you think we are seeing a similar scenario of overhype and over thinking it's going to do amazing, or do you think it's different?
Yeah, and I have to just, before I dig into this, I have to say, I know that this looks like a typical bear market crypto pivot to AI in my personal case. My personal circumstances are a little bit different, as in what we're currently creating at the Yantra, and the people I work with are genuinely top in the world, some of the best smartest guys out there. So I'm super grateful for that. But on your question more broadly, I definitely see that there is some correlation of sort of the hype cycle. Like I have still friends in the digital asset world that are trying to raise money for their new ventures, and they're telling me, "Look, man, all the money in crypto has dried up. The VCs have moved on to AI. They're super easy to get funding in AI. A bit more difficult to get the funding in crypto now." So definitely there is this sort of hype cycle that the VCs have moved on from crypto digital assets to AI. On the question of the utility and sort of how the future is going to look like, obviously no one can predict the future, but what I can pretty safely say is that obviously people are, I haven't seen this level of sort of speculation and sort of circular financing and overinflated valuations, I think, since the dot-com bubble. Realistically, I think that's the sort of good parallel to make. It is a bit worrying because a lot is riding on these sort of Nvidia, OpenAI, Anthropic, the sort of these top sort of 3, 4, 5 companies. The nasty truth is that there probably will be a correction at some point. Obviously, the argument in crypto is that price per sort of token to use AI is going to continue compressing, and then essentially demand for AI is going to increase such that they meet in a happy middle where people are actually happy to pay prices for sort of their usage. At the moment, even what the tech can offer, we can get into exactly specific use cases, and I think they are genuinely already sort of great. All of this is subsidized. If you actually try to pay for your usage, you would never use ChatGPT, you would never use Claude.
Yeah, so we hear. Yeah.
You can pay $200 a month for like a Claude Max plan, and in that use between $8,000 and $14,000 of usage if you were to actually pay as you go, which is insanity. This is going to end at some point.
Yeah.
I think that's when you're going to see people really start using this for what it matters, which most likely is in enterprise use cases and for businesses. Because the truth is, for a business that for example, spends $50,000 a month on AI credits, and it saves them, say, $250,000 in productivity. You can call that replacing people or improving the productivity of people that already exist. Let's simply assume $50,000 in credits, $250,000 in productivity gains, which is more than achievable in certain scenarios. Even if the cost doubles and they pay $100K, it still makes sense for them because they're still $150,000 in the green. So enterprises, I think, will be a lot more sticky than sort of individual users, individual consumers. But there has to be some sort of a correction, right? Like what people said about the internet 20 years ago. Oh yeah, it's going to revolutionize the world. Pets.com is going to be the future, right? It didn't happen in 2 years, and so there had to be a correction. But 25 odd years onwards, it has revolutionized the world. You're consuming this content online through a social media app. This is entirely possible due to the internet, and if not for some of the big bold bets that happened in the 2000s in dot-com bubble, this wouldn't exist. Amazon wouldn't exist, right? Like, I think this is a slightly more natural cycle. It's going to be nasty when it crashes, but it's just how the hype cycle works. On the other hand, I think people are also not using this tech properly. If you're using this as your new Google, it's wrong. You can look up things on your own online, and for every Google search that you do with ChatGPT, it costs the company providing you the compute way more than a Google search. So actually, it's not the best use case.
And they might stop doing that.
No,
if the price goes up and this and that, you might just rely on Google and go back to
They might. I mean, I think this is where Google has a structural advantage, which is they have GCP, Google Cloud Platform. They have their own models. They have invested in a lot of different companies, and Google generates boatloads of cash every quarter. So ultimately, when other people are fighting over the next sort of 100 users, Google can say, actually, you can just use our models, which are, I think, arguably a little bit worse than the frontier models from OpenAI or Anthropic. But you can do it for free or for a fraction of the cost. People are going to switch. Yeah. The consumers are not sticky at all. Enterprise may be a little bit more, but also I'd have an argument against that, to be honest, saying that the flow and sort of customers in AI overall are not sticky. But I think we drifted a bit off topic. We were talking about AI. individual use cases, we can get into that as well. But
yeah,
overall,
let's get into that. Yeah, I mean, actually, I was just asking like how the cycle compares to the cycle that blockchain and cryptocurrency had, with the people were overhyped, thinking it was going to do more than it was going to, and then you're basically explaining that. Well, first of all, AI is already doing more than probably blockchain ever did, right?
100%.
So that's already huge, and that's why you compare it to the dot-com bubble. I think it's a good thing actually for people to be a little bit overhyped. It gives space for this thing to grow, and maybe it's not going to grow as fast and going to take a hit. But at the end of the day, I think in 20 years it's going to be it's still be going to be huge. Well, we don't know for the future of blockchain, right? We don't. I mean, it's very uncertain. So we'll see about that. But yeah, so let's dive into some of the use cases for AI, specifically in what you're doing right now for day-to-day people, and then we'll go into like more real estate related for people watching.
Sure. I'll try to speak about the things that I know I can talk about
in pure English for people to understand too.
this as well, but I'll try to speak about things that are maybe not the most exciting things that we're doing, but things that I can
the public part.
Yeah, the public part that I can talk more about. And obviously, we're going to start releasing more and more content from Yantra to sort of get a bit more attention to what we're doing. But in a nutshell, what you can wherever you can imagine coding, obviously AI excels at that because it is very self-contained sandbox, and they have a lot of trading data.
Mhm.
So the models are extremely good at text, at coding, languages. So while I personally don't necessarily, I don't participate and don't commit code to our main product, everything around the company that touches operations or finance is run and managed by me with AI. So a good example I can give you is that we've automated probably about 90% of our finance workflows. And again, we are a startup of, between 10 and 15 people, depending on when you watch it. So we are still not extremely complicated and extremely big, but finance is also one of those things where the rules for accounting, for example, are extremely codified. There's a set amount of things you can do, and there's a set amount of ways that you can do these things.
Yeah.
And on top of that, everything exists in front of you in some sort of a digital format. It's either an Excel spreadsheet or it's a document that you get from the HMRC or from any other sort of government body. So it's very easy for the model to ingest something, understand how it has to process it based on some rules that already exist, and then produce a structured output. So with this, for example, all of our accounts payable and accounts receivable are essentially the first 90% of the workflow is done by AI. The sort of last human touch, which is what we like to call human in the loop approach. I'm still there. I'm still looking at everything that we do, and I'm still signing off on everything that we do. But a good example is, for instance, a good use case is, every company gets a certain amount of accounts payable, invoices that we have to process, you have to account for, you have to put in your accounting software, and then you have to pay. Either it gets charged, your card gets charged automatically, or you have to send a wire transfer. All of this is automated in our case. So there is a routine that runs. We do a lot of stuff with Claude. I think it's an amazing tool. But essentially, we have a routine where it scans the inbox of everything we've received. It picks up individual attachments. It grooms them, so it reads them exactly, understands the type of supplier and the type of service, double checks it against the database, or if it's missing an entry, looks it up online, then understands, okay, this is a domestic supplier that produces, for example, office supplies. Therefore, this is the accounting account code I have to put it under. So it grooms the bill. This is the VAT treatment. It codes the bill correctly in zero. Everything sort of programmatically. So it doesn't use the AI. It uses code, talks to code, essentially. It's what people call MCPs. So model context protocols, which is just a wrapper around an API. This is getting a bit complicated, but essentially the AI talks directly to the service of Zero. It inputs the right data, it grooms the bill, and submits it, approves it, and then all I have to do is I have to go in the UI, look at it, and say, okay, yeah, everything's correct, approve, or match against an outcoming transaction, for example. And you do this, normally there's a human being doing hundreds or tens of these a day, which is very repetitive, very manual. This is automated already in the current state of things as it exists. There are more use cases around sort of ingesting and analyzing data. across multiple contexts. And essentially, for example, a very good use case we have for it is whenever someone new joins, the best way to understand everything about our company at the moment is to plug your AI or Claude OpenAI into all the systems and then talk to it as you would to a senior coworker, because it knows everything about the product, about how we do things, about when you're supposed to do a certain thing, when you're not supposed to do it, about our policies. It knows everything about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do in terms of like information security, etc., etc. So this is another use case. We have a few more other things happening. So, for example, we have an AI project manager, which is, I think, 80% there. It's not as good as a human being because it doesn't understand the context and it cannot talk to people individually and say, okay, here, I understand, yes, I need to push back, I need to do this. But in the sense of someone that takes a look at everything that's happened, understands the overarching goals and timelines, and says, hey, we are on track here, we might be slipping here, and we've definitely slipped here. Please take a look at this. This already exists, and it helps us, at the very least, redirect our attention to where the work is necessary, and it works better than expected. Obviously, there's always edge cases, but to give you sort of pudding, the proof is in the pudding. I'm able to run finance and operations for a company of 15 people relatively well on my own with AI. If we scaled to 30 or 45 people, I don't think it would be that much more difficult because the volume gets now ingested by AI. Now I just have to be there to give my human judgment in the individual edge cases that pop up, and even that at the moment is not a lot.
So it's like a double checking type of human thing.
Correct.
You have to understand just to double check, but there's no need for all the just entry level people that are doing the big tasks.
Which structurally is a bit of a problem because we need entry level people to then at some point become mid level and seniors in every industry.
Of course.
I honestly have my worries about how that's going to happen. But I think this whole thing will self-correct at some point. We've been joking around recently that AI essentially is never going to replace humans because AI is not going to work for $15 an hour. the tokens that you're going to burn in an hour is going to be definitely way more than $15. So
at some point when it's being so subsidized, etc., you might need people that are cheaper. Okay, so just wrapping up, my last question would be like, what do you think is going to be the biggest impact for us real estate professionals, like where AI is going to be able to basically do most of the job like it is for entry level people and at big companies? What is like just the area that you think the AI could be the strongest? Do you think it could be like, for example, marketing for property and property sales or the different type of things, or maybe architects, or just project manager, sales? Because if you use AI models, like you can basically kind of at some point understand the real value of something, and then the sales aspect of it, well, you just basically run a model that might be able to evaluate a project for you, and you won't need basically the speech and all of the sales process might lose in value. Like, just I don't know, quick like idea of what do you think the biggest AI impact on real estate could be, or the real estate space and professional space?
I'll start with the things I think will not get easily impacted, because I think that's the easier way to do it. Everything that involves a human element, in the sense that I think sales, obviously AI can be helpful in sales, but ultimately when you're buying the property, you're buying it from an estate agent. And that sort of human element is very valuable. It's the same way that technically an AI might give you a diagnosis that's as good or better even than a doctor, but you still want a human being to perform a surgery on you. You don't want an AI to operate on you, right? So that human element, I think, is going to prevail, and people, especially in real estate, very often these purchases, they're either of very, very high value commercially, or when they're residential, they're very emotional. You're buying your first house, you're buying your whatever property you have your kids in, etc. So that you want that human element, and you want to make sure that there's someone that understands essentially what life is. As I said, these models don't have a concept of reality. They don't have a good model of reality. There's this famous thing with like ChatGPT when you say, "Oh, my car wash is only a minute walk away. Should I walk or should I drive to the car wash to wash my car?" It's, "Oh, you should walk. Super close, super easy." It's like, "Yeah, but how am I going to wash my car?" So this sort of lack of understanding of reality is still very prevalent, and people will probably want someone to be there for them. Now, on the things that I think will definitely get automated, or at least in a certain degree, sooner rather than later, is everything related to data. So, as the argument I was making at the beginning about comparables, when you're doing real estate valuations, it's not a tremendously complicated job. Obviously, there is some human judgment, and every valuation is a bit of an argument. You can have an argument about whether it should be higher or lower, and ultimately, the value of a property is whatever someone's willing to pay for it, right? That's ultimately it. If you find someone that agrees with you and is willing to pay the premium, great, you were right in this particular scenario. But I think for a majority of cases, pure data analysis and just looking at every transaction that's happened and all the metadata attached to it. So, what's the total area of the house? What's the total area of the garden? What's the total commercial area of the
You're doing the
floor
financials,
plan?
it would be super easy.
Super easy to ingest the data and give you a very firm understanding of the value of your property and exactly what components feed into that value, because it has very rich metadata. So, a human might look at 100 different properties and give you an estimate, but it won't exactly tell you, oh, the fact that you have a pool that's 30 square meters bigger, for example, than average gives you this much the valuation.
Right.
I think this AI can very easily spot the correlation, which is you give it a table with all the data, you see the properties, you see the metadata, and it says, oh, I'm actually seeing this pattern that pools that have, comparable properties that have a pool that's, obviously I'm making this up, right? But like some element is more pronounced in these properties. I think there is a premium on that a human might not see explicitly, but I am confident that this is the case.
So appraisers
be
careful.
Or rather just learn how to do these tools, because how to use these tools, because then you can do 100 valuations in a time it used to take you 10 or 5. Because again, you have to verify the assumption, you have to make sure the models don't hallucinate, but essentially if you have a solid Claude co-work workflow, you can do a lot more as an appraiser.
Amazing.
I think perhaps another area, and this is something I'm a bit less confident about, but it's a more interesting topic conversationally, is design, and not necessarily design, but maybe doing all of the boring. So, for example, I have a friend that's an architect, and he told me that a lot of his work is not necessarily just the vision and designing it, but then it's making sure that the building is compliant with the code, that the right regulations and everything applies, that this is the exact current format that's supposed to be. It's essentially compliance and making sure that whatever rules you're supposed to abide by, you abide by. I think a lot of this can also already be
like checking plans,
automated.
Plan
reviewing, checking for compliance with explicit rules. You'd be surprised to sort of find out how capable these models are in terms of just ingesting images. Now they can look at pixel by pixel differences in length, in height, in actual measurements. If you give it a scale, it will say, okay, 100 pixels, for example, in this image is 0.1 of a meter or 10 centimeters. Therefore, it can calculate everything pretty well. Again, you still have to check its work, but if you are, if you're going through a lot of volume of properties that you're designing, it's very often that something will slip that the AI that has a very good system prompt and directive will catch. Obviously, it will not produce anything that maybe will produce something that looks great, but I still think the human element in architecture and in sort of in design is very important. But it can essentially be a second pair of eyes that double checks everything that you're doing. Other than this, I think maybe also you can make an argument that not a very glorious element of real estate, but a very financially profitable one, which is funds. I'm sometimes surprised to learn what are the management fees of a specific fund for a given portfolio of properties, and it turns out they're actually quite high. I would be surprised if people don't wake up to the reality that a fund that used to employ 100 people to maintain a portfolio of, I'm just throwing out a number here, 100 properties, maybe 150 properties, cannot do the same job now with 35 people. I would be surprised. The site visits and obviously the in-person stuff you still have to do, but all the back office work that you used to do, emails, double checking, Excel calculations, communication with investors, all of this is super automatable essentially. So again, it's not a very glorious way to look at real estate because people don't necessarily think about it, but these funds hold a lot of global property and they're managing a lot of stuff. Therefore, if you can make their operations more lean and more cost effective,
Yeah.
you're essentially making the markets themselves more effective.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Boris. It was really, really insightful and interesting. So I hope people are going to like it at home. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
I'll see you
Thanks
soon.
for having me.
Ciao.
P&L Podcast.
The business behind the headlines.